Buckingham Palace expected princess and to enter the emergency meeting, study Queen Camilla's proposal, and quietly give her approval. Instead, and read the final page, placed the document flat on the table, and delivered a refusal so firm that no one in the room dared interrupt her. In that single moment, an emergency plan designed to expand Camilla's authority collapsed, and the balance of power inside the monarchy changed before the palace doors had even reopened. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat at the head of the table knowing that everyone present understood why it mattered. His reduced workload had created a dangerous gap inside the royal household, meaning the network that manages official duties, staff, schedules, and communication around the sovereign. Someone had to coordinate statements, appointments, and access to the king. Whenever he could not act personally, Camilla believed her proposal offered order, and saw something threatening. The queen pushed the document forward and asked for approval of a temporary emergency arrangement. The plan would give her final control over palace operations, official communications, and senior family duties whenever Charles was unavailable, and did not hesitate. She removed her glasses, looked directly at Camilla, and said concern for the monarch could not be used to claim powers the crown had never granted. Camilla's confidence cracked. She had entered, expecting resistance to wording, not rejection of the plan. Charles watched his wife absorb the blow. Yet, he also saw the certainty in his sister's face. He wanted to protect Camilla from humiliation, and had forced him to confront a darker possibility. The proposal did not simply fill a gap. It could reshape who controlled the monarchy during his weakest moments, and opened her marked copy. Several passages had been underlined, and one clause carried a double line in the margin. That clause would allow Camilla's office to delay, revise, or block messages before they reached William and other senior royals. William, as heir, was not merely another family member. He was the future king, and restricting his access could create a rival center of authority within the palace. Charles quietly lowered his eyes. Camilla asked why and had arrived with a private draft no one expected her to possess. The princess pushed the unsigned pages back across the table and refused to explain. Her silence landed harder than any accusation. Someone within the palace had broken ranks, and the rejected proposal had already exposed a deeper breach of trust. Camilla then asked the question that changed the room. Who had shown and the draft? Charles remained seated at the head of the table, but the silence around him felt heavier than any public crisis. His reduced workload had left a dangerous gap in the daily running of the royal household. The system responsible for official schedules, senior staff, public statements, and access to the sovereign. Someone had to coordinate urgent decisions whenever the king was unavailable. Camilla believed that responsibility should rest with her, and believed the proposal went far beyond protection. Camilla pushed the emergency arrangement toward her sister-in-law and waited for a signature. The document would give the queen final authority over palace operations, official communications, and the duties of senior royals whenever Charles could not personally intervene. She expected questions. She may even have expected resistance. But she did not expect and to remove her glasses, hold her gaze, and declare that concern for the monarch could never justify powers the crown had not granted. Anne's words landed with brutal precision. She had spent decades serving without demanding greater status, and that history mattered because it gave her refusal moral force. The princess was not fighting for herself. She was warning that one private office could gain control over the flow of information at the very moment the monarchy was most vulnerable. Camilla's confidence began to crack. She looked toward Charles, expecting him to defend the plan, but the king said nothing. He wanted to protect his wife from humiliation. Yet, he could also see the certainty in his sister's face, and was not reacting to a misunderstanding. She had arrived prepared, and opened her own marked copy, and turned to a clause underlined twice. The passage would allow Camilla's office to delay, revise, or block messages before they reached William and other senior royals. William was the heir, the person next in line to inherit the crown, and restricting his access could create two competing centers of authority inside the palace. Charles lowered his eyes. Camilla stared at the marked pages, then asked how, and had obtained a private draft before the meeting. The princess pushed the unsigned proposal back across the table and refused to answer. That silence exposed something even more dangerous than the document itself. Someone inside Buckingham Palace had broken ranks. Anne's refusal shocked the room. But the greater danger was not the rejected signature. It was the personal history that made her believe Camilla could never be trusted with that authority. To the outside world, the dispute looked like a disagreement over palace procedure. Inside the royal family, it was painfully personal. Camilla saw the proposal as protection for her husband and her position, and saw it as an attempt to move power away from the bloodline. Charles saw two women he trusted, forcing him toward a choice he had spent years avoiding. Behind every carefully chosen sentence stood an older wound, and none of them were prepared to admit how deeply it still hurt. Camilla returned to her private sitting room, carrying the humiliation with her. She removed a bracelet Charles had given her and placed it beside a cold cup of tea, then told a trusted aide that Anne had not simply rejected a plan. In her mind, the princess had rejected her legitimacy. The title of queen gave her rank beside the king. But the emergency proposal would have created an independent chain of command, meaning a line of authority able to continue making decisions even when Charles stepped back, and reached her apartment angry. But the anger did not protect her from fear. She had built her life around duty, without reward, accepting exhausting engagements and little public praise because she believed royal authority had to be earned through service. Now she had challenged Camilla openly, and that decision could isolate her from Charles. The princess knew her brother might view the refusal as disloyalty. Yet remaining silent would have felt like a betrayal of William, Catherine, and the future stability of the crown. Charles remained trapped between them. He had not written the proposal, but he had allowed Camilla's office to develop it, and that permission made his silence inside the meeting impossible to dismiss. The king wanted to believe the plan was created out of care. He also knew and would never risk a family rupture over wording alone. Her refusal told him that she had seen something deeper, something he had failed to examine. Camilla insisted to her aide that the arrangement was meant to protect her husband from pressure, and saw a different danger. William had been excluded from the drafting process despite being heir to the throne, the person next in line to inherit the crown. That omission mattered because any emergency structure affecting royal authority should have included him from the beginning. Instead, the proposal placed the future king beneath decisions controlled by the Queen's office, and began reviewing earlier briefings, searching for the first sign that this pattern had already begun. One memory returned with painful clarity. A palace ceremony months earlier, a handwritten message intended for William, and an order that never reached him. The rejected proposal had exposed the conflict, but its true beginning lay months earlier during one ceremony when a missing message changed everything. Long before Anne refused Camilla's emergency proposal, one carefully managed royal ceremony had already convinced her that something was wrong. A message from King Charles was withheld. William was left publicly unprepared. Camilla's private secretary stepped into the confusion and issued instructions. No one remembered the king approving. The ceremony continued. The cameras captured nothing unusual, and the palace called the disruption a misunderstanding. But Anne had witnessed the exchange herself, and from that day forward, she began keeping records. 3 months earlier, Charles entered a Commonwealth reception already fighting exhaustion. The event brought representatives from nations historically connected through the crown, and its order mattered because every speech, greeting, and public statement reflected who held authority inside the monarchy. Before the evening reached its midpoint, the king quietly withdrew and wrote a short instruction directing William to lead the remaining duties and approve any statement released afterward. Charles handed the note to a senior aide linked to Camilla's office. The monarch believed his order would reach his son within minutes. It never did. William waited for guidance, while diplomats watched the schedule shift around him. Then Camilla's private secretary approached, and informed the prince that the queen had assumed control of the remaining reception. He was told to remain in a supporting role. William understood the humiliation immediately, but he controlled his expression and completed the evening without protest. And noticed everything. She watched the order of precedence change, meaning the formal ranking that decides who leads, speaks, and stands first during royal duties. She also saw her nephew step back when he should have stepped forward. Later, the princess found William alone near the private staircase. Furious, but determined not to create a public scandal, William admitted that no instruction from Charles had reached him, and promised nothing. Yet, her suspicion hardened, and confronted the aide before leaving the palace. According to a documented account she later placed in her private records, the official admitted that the king's handwritten message had been held back because Camilla believed he had been too tired to make a binding decision. That explanation changed the meaning of the entire evening. Someone had not misunderstood Charles. Someone had overruled him, and searched the discarded briefing folder and recovered a photocopy of the note. The instruction was dated, signed, and unmistakably clear. Months later, she placed that copied message beside Camilla's emergency proposal and saw the same phrase in both documents. Continuity of household authority. The words struck like a confession. The reception had not been an isolated mistake. It had been a rehearsal, armed with proof that the earlier incident had been no misunderstanding, and returned to Buckingham Palace, ready for a confrontation that could no longer remain polite. The second confrontation took place without secretaries, advisors, or carefully prepared minutes. Camilla closed the drawing room door herself and remained standing. Between them lay the copied note from the Commonwealth reception and the unsigned emergency proposal. What followed was not a discussion about palace administration. It was a battle over loyalty, legitimacy, and the future king. For the first time, and accused Camilla directly of using Charles's vulnerability to place herself between William and the crown. Camilla had requested the meeting after learning that evidence from the disrupted reception still existed. She wanted the dispute contained before William or the wider royal household, the network of family members and staff who managed the monarchy's public and private work could see the documents, and arrived carrying only a slim folder. She refused refreshments, declined the offered chair, and placed Charles's withheld instruction on the table. Camilla spoke first. She argued that the king needed protection from pressure, and that William had shown too much impatience with his father's physical limits. The queen insisted the reception decision had been temporary, designed to prevent confusion during a difficult evening. She framed the emergency proposal as another act of care, not a grab for control. Anne's anger rose the moment William's readiness was questioned. She warned that protecting Charles did not mean weakening his heir. The line of succession, the legal order deciding who inherits the crown, could not be quietly replaced by authority built around marriage. Camilla might stand beside the monarch, but she could not place herself between the sovereign and the future king. Camilla stopped defending the wording and admitted the truth. In a recorded account later preserved in Anne's private file, the queen confirmed that she had personally approved the decision to withhold Charles's handwritten message during the reception. She still called it temporary, but the admission destroyed the claim that an aide had acted alone, and did not celebrate. She opened the folder, removed 2 copied pages, and told Camilla that William had already received them. One contained the rejected proposal. The other contained Charles's original instruction. The future king now knew that his father's order had been blocked, and that a new plan could have placed his access under the queen's control. Camilla pushed back her chair and stood. She warned that dragging William into the conflict would make Charles feel betrayed by his own sister, and closed the folder and held her gaze. Charles might forgive a painful truth, she said, but the monarchy would not survive a convenient lie. Camilla believed Charles's loyalty would protect her, and had shifted the struggle toward the one person whose authority could defeat the proposal permanently. William did not react with an outburst. When Anne's documents reached him, he read every page twice. Then he returned to the clause naming the Queen's office as the final channel for emergency communications and drew a single line beneath it. The danger was now unmistakable. Camilla's proposal would not merely organize the household during Charles's absence. It could decide what the heir was told, when he was told, and whether his instructions reached anyone at all.